Alright guys, this is 3D Comic Creator. My name is John. This is a video on how to do some inking lines that can work with my previous methods of ambient method and also my diffuse, sharp diffuse method. So essentially you want to start out with your flat colors, then you want to put lines on it as if an inker came and inked over your work. So the best way to do that, if you're using Daz, would be, in my opinion, to use pwToon, which is a commercial shader. Since then, I've moved most of my work over to Blender, and I use Freestyle in Blender, which I think is probably the best way to get inking lines. There's a lot more customization, but if you're not going to move to Blender, if you're going to stay in Daz, pwToon is probably your best bet. So that was developed by a company named Poseworks, and they seem to be out of business now, but even so, the shader is still available on the Daz store, and it ran me about $24.95 back in the day, but right now it seems to be marked way down to about $5, and I think that's because Poseworks is gone. I went to their site and I don't really see that they're active anymore, so there might not be any support for this. But anyway, I'll show you some examples here of what I did to make my comic that I showed you in the last video, and you can see what the line work looks like, what the finished panel looked like, and you can get those same results. It's really quick once you get it set up, really quick to go through all those panels and just bust out line work. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to get into Daz here and we'll get it set up. Okay, now here we are in Daz. So this is one of my characters from my comic, and I've got him set up right now as kind of in my toon shader, my sharp diffuse method. I'm going to go ahead and show you a render of him before we even get to the lines. So this is how he's coming out. I didn't really adjust anything here. I just want to show you what we're going to be putting those lines on top of. Okay, let's get back out of that. So then what we got to do now is turn this into our line work. So normally what I would do, I've got my panel, I'm going to do a save as, and then I just save it as the same thing, except I put line at the end of it. That way I can just easily see which ones are my lines. Alright, let's save over that file. Okay, so there's a few things we got to do here. First thing, I'm going to get rid of these lights. We don't need these. We can use them with pwToon. I'll show you something, but for the basic method, we're going to get rid of these. And let's delete those. Then what I had before was transparent background, which I'm going to get rid of. Let's go to my environment. So now I have a white paper backdrop essentially. So that should work. And now we have to change the actual shader. I'm going to select all of these items over here in the scene. Then in my surfaces tab, select everything. I can't just choose all up here. I have to go down here and select everything. Then in my content library, I got to go find pwToon. It's this folder, pwToon resources. In my install, it's in formats, Daz 3D library, then shader presets, pwToon, and you want to ignore this icon down here at the bottom. Instead, go into this folder, pwToon resources. So you'll get all these shader presets down here that you can ignore right away. I found that the best one to start with is technical drawing. So yeah, the technical drawing and even all of these presets, they're just a start. So there's still work to be done. It's not a one-click solution. There really is no one-click solution. You still have to put in some work after the fact. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on this, and so it's going to convert every shader to pwToon. You can see I lost all my diffuse textures. That's fine. That's exactly what we want. It might be a little bit jarring at first if you lose everything, but one thing it won't do, it won't get rid of your bump maps. It will not get rid of your displacement maps either. And in many cases, it'll keep your normal map as well if you're using a normal. So there's a couple things that are going to be wrong here. I'm going to do a render so you can see exactly what happens. Let's just go through this. Let's open up this render window, which I really hate this Daz render window. It's kind of claustrophobic. But anyway, I mean, look at this hair. This is pretty bad. That transparent hair is always a problem in 3D when you're trying to do a comic. It usually always looks bad, kind of no matter what. You just have to mitigate the damage. So that looks bad. Second thing is these eyelashes. Something's up here, and then we have a blue kind of shading color, which we're gonna have to change. So let's knock down some of these problems here. Alright, so the first thing we can do with shading color, let's get rid of this and change it to white. So now I'm going to switch to this spot render, which will be more helpful for us. Okay, so we got rid of the blue. Now we just have clean black and white, which is what we want for our inking. Next, our hair is really screwed up, so we got to fix that. I'm going to change to a different camera here. Okay, so let me scroll here. Let's get to my hair. Now the problem with this hair is that pwToon is drawing an outline at 24 points or whatever it is, and it's also drawing an interior line. The interior line is why it's all coming out black, because there's so many lines in there for it to draw. If I turn this off, we can go to our spot render again. Now, I won't say it exactly looks good, but it looks way better than it did. And you can also, I'm going to close out of that. So if you really feel like you need more lines than that, what you can do, turn on interior line. And then let's kick this up to 25. So our spacing is going to control how dense that is in there. Let's see what it does. So not really much we can see in here. It's clearing out some of those lines. I'm going to kick this up to 250. Let's do it again. Okay, we're getting a little bit more clear. Now finally, I'm going to even kick that up to 2500. Okay, so again, it does not look good, but I'm just showing you what can be done. You might have a situation where clearing out some of those interior lines could be useful. But for now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn off the interior line for the hair, which is usually my standard operating procedure. Let's do this again. Alright, I'm going to leave it like that for now. So, our last glaring issue was these eyelashes. Now the problem here, let me scroll down here, here's eyelash. So, the number one problem is this displacement map. You don't necessarily get a 1-to-1 conversion ratio with your displacement and bump. When it goes over to pwToon, some weird things can happen. So if I really want those eyelashes, I would turn down this displacement. And we'll see that now they look pretty normal. Although usually what I just do, I don't really need those. I'll just go to opacity, turn them all the way off, just so they're not causing a problem. There we go. Now they're just gone. Okay, and we can also see, I'm going to show you in the jacket how some of the interior lines can work. Let's do a spot render on this. Alright, so we've got some clean lines there. And what do I have here for interior? Default for interior lines. And my displacement is looking fine. My bump is still here. It's my hash pattern. And what I'm going to do is kick that up, I think. So let's see. I think what I'll do here is put that at 100. And then let's see what we get. Yeah, so that looks pretty bad. So your bump maps, I think my my hashtag pattern there is just too grayscale. It should have been more contrasty, but this is not going to look good. So what you can do, let me turn it down to 50%. All right, so still not looking great. I can change that some more by changing the spacing on the interior line. Let's try 1. And you can see I can get rid of those lines entirely just by spacing them out. If I put that back to 100, I'm getting something in there. It's not great. I wouldn't use this, but if you have a combination of texture and a combination of the bump and the interior line can help you, you can work with it and try to get some lines out of it. So let's, I'm going to put that down to 0, I think. Let's just go here. And I think I'll put my interior line spacing back to, let's reset it. Okay, so one thing that you're going to want to deal with is your line width, your outline width. And I have to tell you that pwToon has kind of an absolute take on these lines. And by absolute, I mean, if you put it at 24, it's always going to be 24, no matter how big your render is. If you have a very high resolution, it's going to look really small. If you have a really small resolution, that line's going to look really big because it doesn't care what size your resolution is. It's just going to put 24 points. So, for example, let's see what my render setting is. I got 1000 by 2000. All right. So when I render this, and I get some relatively thin lines because it's at 24. You can see, yeah, they're all pretty much thin. Because this is a big file. Well, let's kick that up. I'm going to kick that line for everything. Let's get everything. I probably could just choose all here. I like to be safe. All right, now everything's at 128. Let's see what we get. We can see those lines are looking a little bit thicker already. So, all right. I mean, it doesn't look bad for this size. But what would happen if I were to take my render, let me put it at 500 across. Okay, those lines are looking a lot bigger now. They're still 24 point, but my render is smaller. But pwToon doesn't care about that. It's making these lines, or it's making them 128. It doesn't care what size it is. Let's kick it back up. Let's kick this actually to 250. Now look how big they are. So every panel you make, you have to render it, or you have to test them at full size. Like when you've got color, when you're doing your regular renders, you probably make smaller preview renders. which is fine because it wants to save time. When you get to your inking, get to pwToon, you have to test everything at full size. Otherwise, when you go, I mean, you can have it look good at a small size. When it's time to render the final, you're going to have to redo it so that it looks the way that you want. So you might as well not even go through that. Just make sure every render is at the correct size. Every test render is at the final size. All right. I think finally I'm going to show you guys some zip shading, which I actually recommend you not use, but it's here for you if you can, you know, if you really insist on doing it in here, you can do it here. I prefer to do it in Photoshop, but I'll just show you that real quick. Okay, so to get the zip shading to work, we're going to have to add in a light. I'm going to put my resolution back where it was. Let's do this. We need a distant light. Let's find this. As a matter of fact, let's go back to my default cam. Let's get this. Alright, back to everything here. So let's just choose all. Zip shading was used back in the day of early comics when the printing wasn't that great, where you couldn't really get a lot of fine gradation in the shading, and or they didn't want to pay for that. They probably could, but to simulate like shading, instead of just putting a pure black, they would put dots or lines to, you know, kind of fill it in. So you can do the same thing here. And so I turn it on. The zip radius controls the size of the dot itself, and the point size controls the size of the entire pattern. And for zip shading to work, there has to be a shading color. So I'd have to put that back. I'm going to put this back to black. Okay. So then we have to actually shade our model here. I think what I'm going to do, I think that looks good. So everywhere there's dark, we should be seeing some zip shading. Let's do a spot render on this. Let's see what we get. Alright, so that's looking pretty bad. But what I'm going to do is select everything here. Let's get everything. Let's get all. I'm going to change these values. So I think this radius, let's try 25. Point size, let's try 4. So let's see what we can get out of this. Alright, so that's more like what I would expect. And so yeah, this can be useful. It can make it more stylized. They have an actual zip preset you can see in here. None of these presets work well out of the box. You'll still have to monkey around with it. But to me, I don't like to do this. I was doing this at first, but when you get into Photoshop or wherever, you don't like it. It doesn't work quite well. You don't have much option but to come back here and redo it, re-render. And I didn't like doing that. So eventually I just decided I'd knock it off, and I will not even use the zip shading. So I'll turn that off. But and the shading color would have to go back to white. And I'd even get rid of this light because it really doesn't need to be there. But you can see that if you can monkey around with it, if you can get something useful, it's there to be used. But to me, it's really not what I'm looking for. I'm going to take a render here. Since we're kind of back to normal. Alright, I'm just going to take this and render this out. Let's go ahead and save this. Save this as this, and I'll just add line to the end. Save it. I'm going to go into my Krita. Actually, on this machine I'm using Krita, I'm not using Photoshop. So I should be able to go under layer. Let's see if I can import. import as paint layer. Let's grab this one I just made. Alright, so then here I should be able to change it to multiply. Alright, so now I've got my my whole oh, it looks like I used the wrong setting. I changed it back to the wrong render size. But you can see essentially what we're trying to do here. Just don't do the same thing I did. Make sure the render size is the same if you monkey around with it. But anyway, then you drop these lines right on top, multiply them, and you could then brush out some or do whatever you needed to do, even change the opacity of them, blah, blah, blah. Bottom line is that they're very quick. Once you get it set up, really quick, you could save your preferred settings as a shader preset. Then you really are one click away from just saving a new file, click, render, you're done. You could change the point size or the outline size 2 or 3 times, whatever it needs. And I would do like 4 or 5 of those outline or those line renders. And then, you know, I've got them and I'll bring them in. If I don't like the line size, I'll just either get rid of that one or I'll fade in another one in the layers. It doesn't take much to do. Now, with that said, I truly think that if you're going to be doing a 3D comic and you really insist on doing the inking in 3D, you should probably consider exporting your scene to Blender just to use freestyle. And if you guys are interested, I can show you how to do that. But if you know, a lot of people, they aren't going to do that no matter what. They're going to stick with Daz, which I understand, because it's all, if you keep it all in one place, that's fine. That's quicker and more efficient. I just think you get more control in freestyle. For example, I can tell it to reduce the size of lines depending on distance from camera. So, you know, it'll give me the illusion of perspective, and I can even control the width of the lines. I can control a lot of the tapers and you know, the jagginess of lines. And I mean, there's so many things I can do there. It's just it's pretty ridiculous. But these are serviceable in the sense that you can get some good results that are not spectacular, but they can look good. Another thing I was doing before was I was making out pwToon inks, and then I would even ask a digital inker, hey, could you spruce these up for me? And then I just give them those line files, and they take them and add some depth to them, add some, you know, style and professionalism to them. So that's always good for something that you can give to a digital inker, and they can probably work with it. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or comments about this, and I will be sure to answer you guys, and I will see you guys in the next video.